Hello and welcome. This is Lindsay of Lindsay Lou Rogers with the Momentum Talk Show. And today I have with me Mike Raber. Say hello, Mike.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all.
So great to have you. Excited to learn more about you. I will begin by letting you all know what Momentum stands for as a little reminder, and then we will learn more about Mike and his journey. So, Momentum stands for Monumental Opportunity Manifesting Extraordinary New Times Among Man and Womankind, which was a total download. Maybe Mike will talk about downloads in a minute, just about over a year ago. And so it was started to share tips and tricks from other colleagues and connections that I have that I thought would be wonderful and beautiful for all of you to learn more about. And by learning about someone else's journey, you have the opportunity to reflect upon that information and see how it can affect yours. So take it away, Mike. Tell us about yourself and maybe ECD Madison.
All right. I'm a number one international best-selling author, and as well as a speaker. And I've been referred to, and I really like the way it sounds, a business and wealth architect. In that, I work with small businesses. I help them figure out what is it that they want to do in business. Oftentimes, people will start a business because they are already doing something, say the plumber, who is used to doing plumbing for another company. And he says, well, if I do this myself, or she can make twice as much money. So they go off and start their own business. Or a person has a passion and they want to take that passion to the world. So they start a business. Or they just downright say, you know what, I'm sick of working for somebody else. I'm going to do it myself. And they do it themselves until they realize that it's not as much fun to do it unless they have the foundation behind them, unless they have a way to truly own what they're doing and step into that. And it kind of started from a dream I had as a young child. And I looked around everybody in my community. I lived there in the inner city at the time, and a lot of people in the area were either scraping to get by, or they were involved in the neighborhood somehow, or they had a small business owner. And the one common theme I could see about the local business owners, and it started from this little shop on the corner that sold candy, is people would bring vegetables in, as an example, and give them to the owner. And the owner would give things out to the community. It became this place where everybody in the community would come and gather around, and it gave people a way to spend time with each other, but it was around this business. So it became a part of the community. And I noticed that one after another, these different businesses were doing that. Yet I also noticed a lot of businesses were struggling, and they were having trouble figuring out how to keep the doors open and the lights turned on. And as I got older, I vowed that I was going to create a movement or create a process to help ensure that businesses are able to stay in their zone of genius and continue to thrive, continue to collaborate with others who can, by working together, help each other thrive, right? Very much of a collaborative experience. And in doing so, serve why they're in business. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, where people go into business, the plumber plumbs, the mechanic fixes cars, the realtor might show houses. There's different things the store owner sells, whatever they do. We all go into businesses for different reasons. But the number one theme is generally is because we know that business is a tool or can be an asset to allow us to live the life we want to live. But it also gives us a way to take care of our family. It gives us a way to take care of our community. It gives us a way to show up in the world a little bit better than we might otherwise be if we just did that. So one of the things in building different businesses myself and making all the goofy mistakes that everybody else or a lot of the people I see making in business is it forced me, but also allowed me to learn how to do it efficiently, effectively, and through collaboration continue to grow not only my business, but others that I work with. And that's where the term business and wealth architect came into play, is in working with businesses and helping them, again, figure out what's their why, making sure the foundations, like earlier we talked about the Three Little Bears. It's one of my favorites, or Three Little Pigs, but also Goldilocks and Three Bears. Most of these folk tales have a lot of lessons in them besides just what we read them to be. But the Three Little Pigs, a business is kind of that way. When you build your business, is it built out of straw? Is it built on sand? Or is it built on concrete? And instead of a big bad wolf, as an example. It could be a recession. It could be this past year. I mean, there were a lot of wolves showing up at the doorsteps, and a lot of businesses had to struggle through that and are still struggling through it. And making sure that through the foundation, if the foundation is solid, if we have the proper sequences in place in our business, we are able to, we still might get knocked back. We still might have to navigate around these setbacks, but we are able to weather the storm. And it goes back to why? Why are we in business? One of my favorite phrases is, if our why is strong enough, we can overcome any how. So once we know what our why is, and we know how we want to show up in the business, then it's just a question of designing the framework, designing the foundation underneath us to allow us to do that. And then figuring out who we are best to collaborate with to continue to expand out.
So you're starting with the why in order to build the foundation based on the why.
Correct.
Is it ever challenging for businesses to answer your question about what is their why?
Oh, yeah. In fact, one of the questions I asked them is, because of this, I am, or what is important about this, that I. So as an example, if a person says, building my business is important to me because it creates income. Okay. And why is creating income important? Because if I create income, I'm able to take care of myself. I'm able to take care of my family. Okay. And why is taking care of your family important? And it's kind of like peeling layers of an onion way. And then they'll say, well, because if I take care of my family, then I feel like I'm being responsible and I'm able to help those I love. Okay. And why is being responsible and able to help those I love or you love important? And it's funny because I notice with guys as an example, if I can get down three layers, it's usually a good day. Where in working with women business owners, I'm usually, to get the conversation going, it's like peeling one, peeling another, until eventually the person says, because, and they usually sigh, because if I do this, and they tear up or they might start laughing, there's emotion attached to that. And as soon as I see that, I'll put well, when I could do it in person, now I might slap my hands and say, that's it. Or I'll put my hands on their arm and say, perfect, that's amazing. And anchor that thought in. And it's through anchoring that thought that now when the person starts to have something come up, they can touch, like I tell them to pick, as an example, of the back of the hand. I'll say, pick, that is where the anchor now lives. And when you touch that thing, think about that underlining why. And the emotion, in a good way, comes in back and it feels the person to continue to move around or past again that obstacle. So it's very much like peeling layers of an onion away until we figure out what that true why is. And the reason that's important is, if we are doing, even if it's a job, but if we're in business and we're actually stepping into our why, number one, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? Because it's fun. We were talking earlier about how I was up until 2:30 in the morning last night working on this project. And I looked at the clock at 7 o'clock and I figured I would work on for another hour or two, and it was 2:30 in the morning. And was it work? Yeah, because it fit into my job, my role, but it really was a passion, and I was leaning into that passion. So if we are able to live from our why, if we're able to live from what truly passionates and resonates with us at a heart level, then A, life is fun. B, we can be in balance with that. And C, we are able to continue to evolve and grow.
Reminds me of like a wellspring of like a fountain of youth. Is like if you have this passion or this desire or this drive, whatever it may be, it really may come down after you peel all the layers of the onion back to something related to providing for your family or having more time to spend with them or financial freedom to travel. I'm not sure, everyone's is different, and it appears it's related to emotion for women, which is very interesting, and nice to anchor that in. then I feel like it, like you said, you get lost. We talked about this concept of getting lost in time, where you lose track of time and it doesn't feel like that because it doesn't feel like work. But I do find that passion, if it's there, it really doesn't go away. So the motivation factor it's really not an issue.
Right. And it is anchored for guys too. It's just it's harder to get guys to go into that realm without locking them in a room and beating it out of them.
Get the
That's
emotion out,
for
you're saying?
sports. Yeah.
Okay.
Guys show their emotions in a basketball game or I mean, there's other ways, but having that moment of reflection, not all, but for a lot of guys, it's more awkward. However, it's still there. And when the guy ties into it, I mean, a great example is many years ago, my wife had reached a level in her business that she worked years to get to, and she was finally there. And she's very much wired in the corporate realm anyway. That's who she is as a person. And I always had this vision of wanting to run a business. And I knew that at some point I needed to start a business, build it, grow it, and sell it if I was going to teach other people how to do it, kind of practice what I preach, right? And anyway, my wife was, I don't say why I wouldn't have it. Well, I kind of had something to do with my wife did all the work. She was pregnant with our first child. And we talked about what would we do when she's born. We may put her in daycare, or maybe because I was running a business, and I loved what I was doing at the time, and it was in sync with my wife, but still kind of borderline there. And I had a limousine in the business. It was a real estate office. And I had a limousine that I had acquired, and we would use it for closings or escrow. So when a buyer or a seller closed on their house, we would pick them up in the limousine, take them to closing, give them a bottle of champagne at the end, and really make a fun event out of it. And we had a really powerful client care program around how we took care of our clients. Our goal was we could have 100 buyers in our schedule, and every one of those should feel like they're our only client. And the limousine allowed us to do that, or was one of the things. So anyway, long story short, there's a knock on the door, and let me back up. We're in the hospital. My wife's in labor. Baby's delivered. She goes off wherever she went off to. We are seeing them now kind of looking at each other and thinking, now what? There's a knock on the door. The nurse comes in, hands me our newborn baby, our daughter, and I looked down at her, and it was as if time stopped. It's like, oh, okay. I knew two things. My why. Number one, I needed to start and grow a company, and apparently this was the time because my wife wanted to continue doing what she was doing. And number two, that child wasn't leaving my arms, at least for long periods of time. So I took the limousine, I got up, went into the hallway, called out my boss, resigned from the job, and then a week later started the limousine company. And it allowed me to build the business while taking care of my daughter. And then we had two other kids. So while taking care of the three kids, I was the primary caregiver. My wife was able to continue to do what she loved doing. And at night when she would come home, then I would go off and do runs or whatever I had to do, which was really cool because it gave me the ability to hang with my daughter and with our other two kids and be that role model. It gave me the ability to still support the family. And I was still doing, even though it was a very stressful, up early, bed late lifestyle for a while, it was a season period of time in my life. It gave me the framework and it forced me to learn what I had to learn to be able to do what I do now. But number two, it gave me the ability my clients were sports figures. They were presidents, CEOs of large companies. It was in Seattle. So a lot of the major players in the city were my clients at one point or another. And I got to hang out with them. We would go to the airport and we would talk about different things. In fact, I'm part of a book collaboration project. And we just published it in November, which I can talk a little bit more about later if you want. But the title of the chapter was Don't Let Your Influence or Capabilities Be Overpowered by Imposter Syndrome. And that kind of led to, through this whole process of taking care of the kids and learning about business and building a business and eventually selling the business. And even though I was doing all these different things and checking off done, these mini successes, these goals I had in my life, you would think that that would have been enough, but I always felt like I was an imposter. Like eventually I'm gonna get caught. I better go do something else. Check it off. Okay, good. Now I just got more breathing time. And it became this kind of ongoing challenge to try to stay one step ahead from this idea, faulty idea, but idea. And anyway, through talking to one of my earlier clients was a partner from Microsoft. And we would go to and from the airport and we would talk about all these different things we were going to do many years back. And one of the things was I wanted to write a book and he wanted to write a book. And now, fast forwarding 15 years later, I'm back in Seattle. I opened a branch office in Seattle. So I was in Seattle doing that. Let me back up a little bit. I had built the company when our kids were in their like 6, 7 to 10, sold the company, and we were able to move back to the Midwest, back to Milwaukee, which is where I'm from. And then we had a strong enough foundation built at that point, and it was built on concrete, even though we had to move off of sand to get there, that I was able to take a couple of years and really reflect, what do I really want to do when I grow up? And I didn't have to worry about the economic aspects as well because of, again, building the foundation in place, which is why I'm so passionate about it. But also it allowed time to really reflect. And one of the things, oh, my head thing popped out. I tend to talk with my hands, which is hard to do when you're wired to a computer. But one of the things was I wanted to be back in Seattle doing something. So got an opportunity to open a branch office in Seattle. So I was back there doing that. And I had just written my second book. My daughter and I wrote a book together called The Parenting That Makes Sense, The Secret to Raising Financial Savvy Kids. And it's fun because one of the things my daughter, not to digress, was kind of a funny story. One of the things that all three kids, they became my laboratory, so to speak. So I would learn these concepts, or I would take them to a seminar. And my daughter, when she was 9, she was already hanging out and talking to Zig Ziglar face to face, or Jim Rome, or Brian Tracy, a lot of these major players in the education realm. She was able to build a mentor, not really a mentor because they indirectly mentored her and she met them, but also she listened to, every time we were in the car, I would have a CD or a cassette, something going in the background so the kids could internalize it. And one of the common themes in the family was, if any of the kids said, I can't do that, I'd say, okay, you can't, or you choose not to. I can't, really. There's no possible way, if you put your mind to it, you couldn't figure out a way to do that, either by yourself or through the help of somebody else. Well, I guess, I mean, if I were to ask so-and-so to help me, I probably could. All right, then why don't you ask so-and-so to help you? I don't know, I just don't want to. Okay, and let's call a horse a horse. You don't want to. I don't want to hear you say you can't unless you truly can't do it. But if you don't want to, that's fine. You don't have to. I don't want to is a very valid answer. I can't unless you truly can't do it. I would love to be a jockey, but I'm probably not going to be a jockey anytime soon unless I either shrink or find a very large horse. And that horse is incredibly fast. Maybe if Clydesdale enters the jockey world. But so yeah, there are limitations. However, most things we can figure out a way to get the help, enlist the help of somebody else if we truly want to do that. Not to digress here, but in growing, raising kids, building a business, it all kind of ties into the same disciplines, our mindset, and how we choose to step into that zone of genius, kind of like I talked about earlier. And one of the things, so anyway, so our kids grew up in that realm. And I had written this book, and now we're back in Seattle, and I'm with George, and we're having lunch one day, and he starts laughing. And I said, what's so funny, George? And he goes, well, just got to think. What do you think the chances of a limousine driver and a partner in Microsoft 15 years later sitting together, eating pizza, and talking about a book they just wrote? And it's like, wow, I guess you're right. That's kind of cool. And then what was even cooler was in talking to him as I was preparing for the book that we just released in November, he shared that he also was influenced or imposter syndrome was a challenge of his. And here's someone who was incredibly successful in his own right. And when he told me that, I was like, wow, but you've done so many amazing things. He says, yeah, but it's what I do. It's not necessarily always who I am. And I had to step into that role. But it was that internal talk that he learned how to work with, obviously, but it's whether or not we choose to get derailed by it. Again, don't let our influence or capabilities be overpowered by. If we have capabilities as an influencer or as a business owner, as a parent, as a friend, whatever it is that we're doing, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that little self talk in the back of our mind saying, but I'm not good enough or I'm not ready. Why not? If you do it, you become ready. One of my biggest pet peeves is the phrase fake it until you make it. I will change it a little bit. Faith it, Faith. Faith it until you make it. Because you don't have to necessarily have the skill now. If you just fake it and kind of wholeheartedly do it, eventually either it's not going to work or someone's going to figure out or whatever. It's a far more hard or difficult way to do it. But if you truly have the faith, you believe that you are and in the process of becoming the person that it would take to do that, and then you start out and you take baby steps and work towards doing it, eventually you will become that person. Eventually you will do it. So having the faith to step out and then do it in step after step after step until you reach the point to where you're doing it. So I guess one kind of segue is we all have a reason, and it's our job to figure out what that is and then step into that role. And that kind of came around to, so as this I was working on this book, we had moved to Milwaukee, started consulting and working with different businesses, etc. And I spent days, hours, months figuring out how can I continue to make this process better and better and better. And I kept forcing it. And I guess in kind of bringing that thought full circle, it came back to a couple of years ago. I was talking to my daughter, my older daughter, who really became my, and still is my right hand person in many ways, who is brilliant in her own right. And she goes, Dad, I firmly believe we are all born with the superpower. And it's our job to figure out what it is and share it with the world. It's like, yeah, I agree. That makes sense. And then she looks at me straight in the eye. She says, so, Dad, you spent the last 25 years taking care of us, and you raised 3 amazing kids. You've helped Mom with her business. You're always helping us become better versions of ourselves, but you're cheating the world. I was like, I'm what? What do you mean? I'm taking care of clients. She says, no, Dad, not one to one to one. You should be writing more books, giving more talks, doing things like what we're doing right now, sharing and helping other people become their own core genius, how to discover what their superpower is, and stepping into it. So she goes, I'm so glad that you have been here and are continuing to be in our lives, but it's time for you now to turn it outward and spend your time helping others and sharing with others and being that influencer that you've been trying so hard to become. She says, I have news for you, Dad. You're it. But until you see it up here, you won't be able to show up intentionally anyway. And it was that moment, it's like, oh, wow. Wow. And it really became like I was sharing with you earlier. I woke up the next morning and was like someone flipped the switch. And I had a completely different outlook on life, on my role here, on what I need to do and how I need to show up. And what's so fun is we all have those abilities. I'm not any different than anybody else out there. I'm me. But as long as I'm willing to authentically step into who I am and do it with the intention to serve, the intention to help others, then A, it becomes fun, and B, I can truly become who I was and am and will continue to be designed to be. Wow, I
So
kind of
beautiful. Go
got
ahead.
off on a tangent there.
Oh, I'm just curious how, no, that was a great transition. I actually am going to ask you about influencer's journey next. However, I wanted to know how you felt when she said that to you.
Happy, scared, completely, so where I'm looking for, proud of knowing that everything that I had put time into and building. Because one thing is kind of like the artist who chips away at a statue. And I think in parenting, it's often that way, or in a relationship, it's often that way. We chip away and we chip away and we try to create this vision of what we want or what we hope it will turn out to be. And even to the point where the statue might be done and it might be up on a mantle or it might be in front of a beautiful building somewhere. Unless we step back and really get a look at it from afar, it's hard to really appreciate that. And I was so much in the now and trying to take care of the kids and trying to do this and trying to be this and trying to be that. I never took the time to step back and just be and just say, wow, not bad. This job's
That
not
reminds
done
me.
yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, such is life, the journey. However, it reminds me of that time of reflection
Hmm.
and seeing, it's just honoring the past and how far you've come and how much work you put in there, kind of patting yourself on the back and saying, good job, keep
Hmm.
going, but good job right now. And
Yeah.
honoring that. That's a really big deal to do. And it's a time of celebration as well.
Hmm. And it's funny too how with kids, I always told their kids that you need to be polite, you need to be respectful. However, you are also your own person. So if I do something or somebody around you is doing something and it's goofy and it doesn't make sense to you, you have my full permission to ask why. Don't challenge it in a mean way, challenge it in a curious way, but ask why and expect an answer or find an answer if an answer is not readily available. And oftentimes growing up, because the thing that's really cool about kids, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own right, is they're like little mirrors, number one. And number two, because I have so many other things going on in my mind, I might have to hear something 10 times. A 5-year-old, once. I often will joke around and say, if you have a really hard challenge, find a 5-year-old and ask them how to do it. And
They're
they'll be
pretty
surprised.
straightforward. Huh?
Yeah. And so it was always that sounding board, going back to the laboratory scenario. So they would often share different ideas growing up and different things, but they were always different. Like, as an example, a couple of years ago, I decided I was going to get in shape and start exercising. And my daughters were my accountability partners. And I would get on a treadmill, I would run a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles or whatever. And then I would say, okay, I'm done. And they would say, oh, good job, Dad. We're so proud of you. And it was so nice. My son, on the other hand, I would say, wow, son, or I would text all three of them what the goal I was working on. And daughter one, good job, Dad. I'm proud of you. Daughter three was, wow, that's exciting. We need to do it when I'm back from school. My son, way to go, Dad. You learned to embrace the suck you might live.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but
Not
that's
so
him.
fluffy.
Right, which is how we're all wired differently, going back to that why and allowing to show up in however that looks like. And but I mean, it's funny though. But on the other hand, other questions that I'll ask him if I need a direct answer, he's the one I go to because he looks right through all the crap and goes straight to the end result and says, well, if you do this, this, and this, you'll probably get there. And if not, then allow yourself to renegotiate or re-explore, redefine the way and start again, knowing it's a windy path and not necessarily a straight line. So,
Eye-opening and refreshing sometimes to get a
mhm.
straight answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's other day. I'm curious. I was actually thinking about your clients and just people in general about what motivates people because sometimes the straight response is very
Mm.
disheartening, and sometimes you want the cheerleader to cheer you on, and sometimes you want the person to say, "Oh, it's going to be okay. You're doing great, and you'll do better next time if you're having a hard day." And I think people are motivated by different things, and there's a time and a place for all of them.
Mm.
But you have three avenues you can go down depending on which answer you might want to receive and in which format.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we have to explore further back. Like I was working with a client who had, she was brilliant and she kept hitting this glass ceiling in her business. And she couldn't figure out how she was going to break through that. So we're talking and I'm asking her different questions about her business. And it's like, okay, she has the skill sets, she has the clientele, she has the service. There's no reason why she's not making 3 times what she's making right now. So it's like, okay, there's something here that you're not identifying and I'm not getting given the conversation we're having. So I took it back to, so let's explore when you were a child, explore some of the things your parents talked about. And after a course of 15, 20 minutes, and some of the answers, going back to peeling the onion away, right? One of the answers that she said indirectly, but it jumped right out as if it was right there in front of us, was she was taught at an earlier age that it's okay, that you must work hard, number one. Number two, it's okay to live a good life if you work hard. But if you make too much, it's a sin. So she put this belief over herself that it was okay as long as she worked hard and did the things that she needed to do to live a very comfortable life. But it wasn't okay to go beyond that abundance, right? And because of that, that's what her glass ceiling was. So I said, okay, you obviously are a person of faith. You're a person of deep character. What are some things that you like, fund foundations or nonprofits, some charitable things? What are some things that really mean a lot to you? So she spent a minute or two telling me about that. And I said, pick one. She was okay. So I said, I want you to now take out your checkbook and write a check for $10,000. I want you to post date it out 3 months from today. She goes, okay. And I said, 3 months from today, you're going to deliver that check. And she goes, $10,000? What if I can't? I said, then push it out another month or two. But what if you can and you don't? And she goes, oh, okay. So 3 months later, she could, and she did, and she delivered it. And I said, what did that teach you? And she said, it taught me that if I have the ability to earn beyond what I need to live a good lifestyle, and I don't, I'm cheating others out of the opportunity that I might be able to bless them with, which is a bigger sin than earning in the first place. It's like, okay, I'll go with that. And her business grew and grew and grew and grew because now she, a portion of what she made, I think I was sharing with you when we talked a while back, one of my mentors started out coming over from Ireland. He had $92 in his pocket, ended up in a motorcycle accident, $250,000 in debt, busted through that, became very successful in his own right. And he had 2 goals. Number one, he wanted to be able to become debt free and pay off all his debt, his hospital bills, etc. And number two, he wanted to be able to earn a good life, but also have the means to give a large portion of what he earned away to help other people. And he did. And to this day, and his business is worth tens of millions of dollars, and he lives off of 10% of everything that he makes. 90% goes to charity. 90% goes to, he has a 900-acre orphanage in Africa, as an example. He has multiple foundations that he puts money into, and it's because of that philosophy to give, ask, and then receive, but give first, that he was able to do that. And one might say, 10%, how do you live off of 10%? If it's a couple $1,000,000, it's not that difficult to do. But his skill sets allow him to do that, and he loves doing it. Now, I'm not saying that it's all about giving away, and being unhappy. Obviously, we all show up in different ways, and we all have different purposes given to us. The janitor who might be sweeping a hallway, someone might look at that person and say, wow, he's just a janitor, or she's just that. But if he's happy, he's earning a living, or she's earning a living, maybe he has a family he's taking care of, maybe he has parents he's helping. We don't know what the story is behind the story. And if they're owning that, if they're stepping into that, they are as successful in my book as a person who is a multi-millionaire because they are serving their calling. And I think in business, it gives us that ability to step into that role and let our business be a vehicle, let our business be an asset that will allow us to live the life we want while serving our community.
It almost seems like the business or the person stepping into their role with their values defined is the mechanism or the channel to receive the funds and then distribute them where they would like them to go. And if
Mm-hmm.
90% of that is charity and they live on the other 10, that's really just directing funds from clients to recipients, essentially, through.
Yeah.
That's how I see the flow happening.
Mm.
Wow, this is so great.
Thank you.
Is
And
there
it,
anything you'd like? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it, so, and that kind of, I've been talking more about the profit piece of it, but then there's the also the outreach, the journey that we're all on, right? And how do we show up in this journey, the different seasons of life, so to speak? And that's where earlier you asked me about the influences journey. And really, in the conversation that my daughter and I had that one day, kind of cultivated, I looked at the process that we go through. And we have, myself included, have mentors or coaches that are up here, and we look at them and say, man, I wish I could do that. Well, they were us at one point. They're just a little bit further down the road. And if we do and are willing to do what they did, maybe not the exact same way, obviously our version of it, we too will have that influence. Like one of the things I talk about in the book is we always look at being an influencer or look at this journey, a thought leader, etc., as this high end thing. But what about a 3-year-old who had just figured out how to run is an influencer to the 1.5-year-old who can barely walk? And what if the 1.5-year-old were to say, wow, I wish I could run like Johnny or Susie, but I'm only 1.5. I can't. And they chose to crawl. They'll still get through life. It's going to be a lot more of a challenge than if they say, wow, so how does Johnny or Susie really do that? They kind of stand up and they take one foot forward, another foot forward, and they start walking. And they could copy, which is one way to do it. Or, and this is where the influencer's journey comes into play, what if Johnny or Sally were to see that their little brother or sister or friend is struggling and say, here, hold my arm, walk with me. And now the two of them walk, and eventually Johnny or Sally or Susie will become the 3-year-old, and they can reach back and take the hand of the next 1.5-year-old and lift that person up, and on they go. And
Beautiful visual.
thank you. And whether it's children, teenagers, stepping out and watching the things that, one of the things I'm so grateful for about where we are as a culture now is I think it's one of the first times in certainly my lifetime, if not longer, that kids, teenagers, the kids that we can't get to clean the room have a voice and they're willing to share it and people are listening, which is awesome because that shows that if our kids now become leaders in their own right and they lead from behind, we're going to see the change that we want to see in our communities because it's from the bottom all the way up. And I kind of liken it to a hill. If you want to climb up a hill, there's 2 ways you can do it. And it goes back to the influencer's journey. One way is, let's say it's kind of a raining and it's a muddy path and kind of winds around. You can walk up the path and you can slip and slide, but you will get up there eventually. Or there's another path that maybe it's a little bit steeper. And every couple feet, there's a plank that goes across the path. And you step on the plank and you get your balance. And you take another step and you step on another plank and you get your balance. And you do this plank after plank after plank until you get to the top of the hill. Chances are, even though that path might be steeper than the other one, because of the help of each plank keeping you balanced, you're probably not going to be as muddy as you would be on the other path. You probably aren't going to slip in the mud, etc. And you still would get to the top of the hill, or maybe you would decide that you don't want to go to the top of the hill and you want to find a path and go off in a different direction. Either way, as long as you have the planks to help you through the process, it's going to be a far more rewarding and effortlessly or less effort of a process. And that's what I like in the influencers journey is thought leaders, influencers, coaches, business owners, community members, all of us connecting arms. One person, one plank after another, and we continue to lift, we continue to grow, we continue to move upward. And by doing that, we'll do one of two things. Number one, it will make us all become better at whatever it is that we're doing. It will make us all, through collaboration with each other, have a lot more fun and be more imbalanced in physical and the mental portion of that, right? Because now we can lean on each other. And it will raise our energy. It will raise our vibration, because if I'm trying to do something myself and I force it and I force it, my I might be moving forward, but my vibration is going to drop. And that's where you feel tired, etc. But if I'm doing it together, or someone's helping me and I'm not struggling, I'm going to have the ability of the growth coupled with the other person's energy, and we live together. So I'm going to loan some of my energy to that person because they're helping me. Therefore, it's like a great example. If you give someone something or you help somebody out, the other day a person's car broke down and I was helping them push the car around the corner to where it was safe. And when I did that, 3 other people came over, and the 4 of us and the person pushed the car together. And then we all walked away and never saw each other again. But for one brief moment, the person who had his car saved was very happy. I was happy because I could step in and do what I could do. The other people came together and they were happy. So by my stepping forward, it allowed them guys to step forward. Together, we all benefited. Even though it was only for the sole reason of helping this one individual out, all of us benefited from that one experience. And all of us walked away happier and a little bit better of a human than we were a couple seconds before, maybe a little teeny tiny little bit, but nonetheless. Now imagine that one after another, after another, after another, multiplied by tens, if not hundreds of millions of people, the impact through the journey that we can all have.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of the concept. So the people that walked away that were giving, and then the recipient who had the car, is this concept of if you're not letting people help you, you're taking away the joy of giving from them. Because there's a lot of satisfaction in helping another person. You walk away feeling like, hey, we did that, they're doing great. And then you're more likely, kind of like the concept you talked about with your children, if they don't want to or they can't, about asking for help and collaborating. So it sounds like there's benefits in all of them, or the reaching behind and pulling the next person up. I think there's benefits in both roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it makes it easier for everybody and more fun, which is, and figure there's enough things in life that we have to deal with just because of being alive. So why make it more difficult than it has to be?
Right. Well, I think a lot of people feel like it's, I don't want to use the word weak, but this might be an internal thought that I can't ask for help because it means that, I can't do it by myself. But, in reality, it's a lot easier when, sometimes you just have a question and someone already has the answer and they're happy to share with the information with you. And it only take a quick second.
Yeah. Or one that I suffered personally from for years was I didn't think I was worthy to ask. And going back to the imposter syndrome, because of that, I didn't ask. A person would say, hey, how are you? And I might be in pain. I would say, oh, I'm good, because I didn't want to appear weak. But also, I didn't want to, out of fear that if I were to say, actually, no, I'm actually struggling with this, that the person might say, oh, well, that's too bad, and walk away or whatever. I mean, who knows what, not would they do that? Of course not. But in my mind, there was that kind of tug of war. So I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I could face rejection, or I would put the person out. Like maybe the person would help me because they're a good person, but they're busy, and now I'm making them work more. am I worthy of that? Right? The whole sense of worth comes into play. And it wasn't until I was talking to a coach a couple of years ago, and I needed to do something. I needed help to do it. And he says, "So did you ask for help?" No. He goes, you are one of the most selfish people I know. And I was like, come again? Me? I don't think so. He goes, yeah, you are. I was like, how? Explain how I am selfish, please. And he goes, if that person were to help you, would that person also benefit from it? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it's work. They don't really need to help me. And he was okay. If they help you and you succeed and you're able to do whatever, do they not share in that win even a little bit? I say, yeah, of course they would. He goes, why would you deny that person the ability to share in your win? Or why would you deny that person the ability to help you? Because maybe someone helped that person and they want to pay it forward and help someone else. And now you are the right person in the right time. It's like, oh, so what you're saying is I should ask for help. Duh, he kind of looks at me. He was one of those coaches that I would say something and he'd look at me with a smile on his face, but his eyes were saying, that was the dumbest thing I ever heard. And then he would explain why.
Oh, I see. That helps. I think there's a
Mhm.
vulnerability in that though, too, to ask because
Yeah,
you're showing that you need something and that's sometimes prevents people from asking.
yeah. And part of it too, I think, is just having that, if the why is big enough, then we can't. I mean, one of the things for years, I was able to, my goals were just high enough that I could get to them. And I had people around me, coaches, etc., that would help out. But I was able to reach those milestones on my own. On my own, because I always had people helping. But I didn't really have to ask, it just kind of naturally came. But as my goals got larger, and especially when I had the vision of building this movement of 100 million people, I mean, I'm a person of one with a few other people I'm connected to. If I'm going to reach 100 million people between now and 2025 or 2024, October 4th, 2024, no, 2025. Yeah, October 4th, 2025. There's no way that that's going to happen unless I ask for help, unless I utilize the help of other people, unless I build a community, unless I create that collaboration, all the things we've talked about all this time. It cannot be a power of one, it has to be a power of the many.
I feel like it also has to do with letting go of control and that this concept of the how is none of our business. It's like if the why is big enough and this thing has to happen or needs to happen and the reason why, getting it done or how it gets done really doesn't matter. You just know like this thing's got to get done. I will recruit the people to take care of it with me because the mission is bigger than the details of the process.
Yeah,
Big driver in that.
so true.
Yeah. It's been a great conversation, Mike. Is there anything else you'd like to add? This has been really nice flow.
Well, I think, did you still want me to share that poem that I was telling you
That
about?
would be great. Yeah.
Okay. And it kind of ties into what we're talking about as far as the whole Mountain, the whole, one of the phrases I came up with a while back was, by ourselves, we can do amazing things. Yet together we can climb the highest mountain. And it creates the collaboration, the helping, everything we had just talked about. And then I had a second piece of that, which came to me when we did the summit last week. And that was, by ourselves, we can be a shining star. Yet together we are the mountain. So it's one thing to climb the mountain. It's another thing to become the mountain. Again, growing that foundation on concrete, building our life, whether it's in the physical form, in the mental form, in our business, building it on solid foundation. And from that, we become like the mountain. It's when we try to push, kind of force it, that's when we get away from that. So anyway, I was preparing for a talk that I had to do at the summit last week. And I woke up in the middle of the night with just this series of phrases I started downloading, and then I wrote it down and went back to sleep. And I woke up the next morning, I started looking at it and reforming it, and it became a poem, which is kind of interesting since I'm not really what I would consider myself as a poet. So, but it kind of touches pulls it all together. And it goes back to the mountain. Have you ever thought about the true power of a mountain? It sits in complete stillness, yet completely grounded in its natural form. One might say energy flows like a river, its current winding around each bend until it finds a lake. Doesn't the mountain also give birth to the river? The mountain just peacefully sits there for the world to see, yet many have died trying to climb it. Nature can cut a piece out of the mountain, yet after a few strong rains, it moves back into its natural form. Have you ever thought about the true power of a mountain? It towers over the land, yet absorbs the mightiest of storms. It gives shelter to much of nature, from the mountain lion down to the tiniest animals. It provides oxygen and many other of life's necessities, yet sometimes it spews fire from its mouth. Yet in the end, it's just a mountain in its truest form. A mountain can be seen from a great distance. It can be heard as the wind blows, yet it's rarely listened to. My wish for you is to be the mountain, strong, flexible, courageous, authentically you.
Beautiful.
Thank
Nice
you.
visual too with that. So you can just picture exactly what you're saying as you're saying it there.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Kind of ties it all together where I think as influencers in our own right and in our own journey, we can do a lot by ourselves, but if we continue to collaborate with and link arms with others and move forward together, like that mountain, we will have the mass behind us and with us to make great things happen.
Be able to withstand not only the storm, but support that many people. You need the team to be able to do that and the collaboration. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do that all on your own.
Yeah, so true.
It's really great. You're officially a poet.
Thanks.
An author and a poet now. Maybe you can put the poem in your next book if that's in the runnings.
It's actually not a bad idea. I'm working on, I took 2 books and merged them together into one. And one is, so this would be the perfect transition. It kind of touches on back to my title of being a business and wealth architect, that really wealth, there's a lot of different words that we throw around that. I really think my own core genius is creating financial liberation, whether it is, again, the foundation, it's helping with the financial plan, it's helping with figuring out how to use one's income, one's resources for the betterment of all. It's creating the essence of liberation. What does money or wealth mean to us? And how do we become liberated from the restraints, from the pain, from a lot of the negative stuff that can come with it? And it's really a tool, no more, no less, when you think about it. And as long as we use it as a tool and we're not tied to it, it's part of what we do, but it's just a tool, then we are liberated from that, just like we would a hammer or any other tool that we might use. And then the other component is the collaboration, building of communities. And that's one of the things like with the U brand and stuff that we've been working on, is having the two work side by side, and then together we can grow.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Thanks. But yeah, so that's what the book is about, is half of it is the mindset and the building of the community, and the other half is the financial tools that a person or business needs to make sure that they continue to thrive in good times and in bad, because in life we have both.
And from the very beginning, you mentioned the janitor or the mechanic or whoever. I really think that everyone defines financial success very differently. It can mean many, many things. And you had several examples of that as well. And I think it takes all kinds of people, because you can't have all leaders and you can't have all team members. You need all different types in order to run society, I think. So everyone really finding their true essence, or however you specifically phrased it, is really, really important.
Yeah, So true. And it's funny how culture or society would tend to pigeonhole people into different, take Gandhi as example. When a person hears about Gandhi, at least I know in the early days, I would envision a guy sitting in a meditative sort and meditating and having the essence of peace and kind of just sitting there and very much a mover and, and got through the threat of starvation. I mean, he made a lot of, by not eating, he's something as simple as eating as a way of making his point, right? But the world kind of paints Gandhi as one way. And the things that you don't really hear talked about is that he was a brilliant attorney. He was a really powerful business leader in his own right. And that even though he used what the world knows him at as his method, given the situation of where things were at, to make his point, he had a lot of powerful and amazing skill sets behind him. Or Mother Teresa is another scenario where you think about Mother Teresa as being impoverished and basically living for people, but yet she was probably one of the best salespeople and motivators around. And when she would walk into an office and say, I need $10 million and I need $10,000 to do this, people didn't say no to her. They tried, but it didn't go very far because of her tenacity, because of her why was so strong. She could overcome the hows, overcome the whats that got in her way. And even though people look at Mother Teresa as one way, she was really a very powerful leader in her own right. And the list goes on and on and on. But those are two, I think, big icons that we think about in time.
So Gandhi and Bucky and I share a birthday, October
really?
2nd. Yeah.
Oh,
And I
nice.
met Gandhi here in Madison. He came when I was in college and got to see him. My biggest takeaway was he didn't have any shoes on. That was what I remember in the moment. He was up there barefoot sitting and wearing white. But yeah, that was good. And I think you mentioned the leaders. You know, I think it seems that maybe what they were deciding to lead or what their mission was had shifted, but the inherent leadership qualities had always been there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all the steps between. Like John Maxwell is known for saying, if you think you're a leader, get up and leave the room. And if you leave by yourself, you're just out for a walk. If people follow you, you're a true leader.
That is a very powerful statement.
Which and sometimes can get us in trouble. I remember when I was in 7th grade, we had this substitute teacher, and I was kind of a punk back then. And the teacher did something that made me mad and then continued to make other kids mad. And about halfway through the day, the teacher, keep in mind this is Milwaukee Public Schools, she goes, look, if you guys aren't going to do what I want you to do, then you can just get up and go home and I'll give you all an F for the day. And it's like, you're going to give us an F for the day if we go home. That's right. So I stood up and said, you hear her, guys? We're going to get an F for today, which meant nothing because we didn't have grades. There's no way you could get F for the day. They're lucky. We're lucky if we could show up the next day. So I said, I'm leaving. Who wants to come with me? And she goes, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back for the rest of the day. I said, okay, you guys heard that. So I got up and everybody else got up and we all walked out of the class and went home.
Your leadership skills right there.
Yeah.
But it embodies the exact same example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, granted, I got in trouble the next day for that, but
yeah, I was just going to ask you what happened next. This is a good story.
I called down to the principal's office, and the principal said, "What you did was wrong. If you would have got up and left, that's one thing, but you enticed everybody else following you, which was wrong." And I said, "I was just doing what she asked." And she said to leave, and then I realized that what his point was, going back to that leader thing, there's responsibilities with leadership and what we do with it.
And I think really investing in and taking time to build leaders, because the choices that they make do matter.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. and making sure that, yeah. So on the one hand, that was the making of who I became as a very young person, as a leader, because I never did that again, which was I found other ways to use those skills in a way that was for the betterment of the whole versus what I thought was cool.
Right. Sometimes it takes those moments. I talk about like a bowling alley of just like getting off the track a little bit and just a little reminder that, okay, that's not the direction I'd like to go. I'd like to go this direction here. And it just reinforces the way you do want to go versus having that question in your mind. Like, maybe I wanted to be a leader that led this thing, but really, I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And neither does
Yeah.
anybody else.
Right. And is it a personal agenda or is it an agenda that's designed for the betterment of the whole?
I think when you take yourself out of the situation, you really do find out, what is the point of what I'm doing? It's not really to benefit yourself at all. It's really to guide people where they need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to?
Yeah, being that guide versus what, yeah, I guess guiding from a front and having, if we have to push it, then that's something that's not, that we're not in alignment with it. It should flow naturally.
Which is the concept of the make it happen versus let it happen or let it flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I heard a podcast recently that was talking about, taking credit for the work that you do. And someone said I want to say it was Lee Harris and Matt Kahn, he said, it surprises me so much when people say I'm so humble. And he's thinking, it's not mine recognition to take. This is a bigger power. And he talked about what it all comes down to is how you treat people, all people, not just
Mm-hmm.
top people or whatever you see in your mind. It's how you treat everyone that you interact with and what kind of ripple effect or impact that makes on the world as well. Because sometimes you don't know along the way, like limo driver and Microsoft, writing a book. So that you just never know how those interactions are going to play out or how these people are going to, continue to be woven into your life.
Yeah. And even ego can be in a good way or a bad way, but great example was how, and I write talk about this in a book that I wrote called The Silent Mentor. And it's the story about this guy who was an older guy who was a mentor talking to this younger guy on a plane. And it takes place over a flight between Milwaukee and Seattle. And all the lessons that this younger guy, these conundrums that the younger guy is working with. And the older guy becomes his mentor. And I always was his mentor. So it's a whole interesting paradigm there. But one of the things that, and it came from, we were talking about channeling earlier and kind of bringing in that download of information. And so I had wrote this book and I could not figure out the chapter. The final chapter of the book I could not come up with for a better part of a year. And it just sat on my desk. And I would look at it, I would look at it, and look at it. And then one day I was down on a dock at a place where I was living at the time. And I was having a pity party and really looking back over the last 4 years of, because I had talked about earlier how I went to Seattle to build a branch office. And so I get this calling to go to Seattle and build this branch office and kind of lean back into what I knew and loved in Seattle when I was there. And 6 months afterwards, but okay, let me back up for a second though. There was a gentleman who I was introduced to before making the decision to do this, who lived in Seattle. And he wanted to open a branch office. I was hoping that someone from the corporate office would go and help him do this. So I stepped into that role and was flying back and forth between Milwaukee and Seattle every other week for, took 4 years. And, but anyway, and 6 months after being in the office, he and I were talking, and he had worked for Boeing, retired from Boeing and became a financial advisor. And I asked him, I said, why did you, or what was it about working for, why do you retire from Boeing and become a financial advisor and now open an office? Doesn't seem like the thing that most people would do in retirement. And he goes, well, funny you should ask. He had went to a Toastmasters meeting in 2004, and this young 9-year-old girl, and he was just getting ready to retire at the time. This 9-year-old girl gets up and talks about the importance of financial management and why it's so important for parents to teach financial management to their kids. And he goes, the girl inspired me so much that I went home and I told my wife about it. And she goes, well, what are you going to do to help in her calling? And he goes, I'm going to become a financial advisor and I want to see if I can work with families and help families get their financial house in order. And he did that, right? And then he went on this quest and became a financial advisor and all of that stuff. And he's telling this story. And I just looked at him and I started to tear up. And now keep in mind, he and I had this conversation in 2013. So it was from 2004 to 2013, right? I said, do you know who that little girl was? He goes, who? That was my daughter. And that was the last Toastmaster meeting that we went to because the next day we moved to Milwaukee. And he just goes, wow. So because of that, I was convinced that she brought him into the financial business and he opened up a financial office that now I was part of. And we're working together with this vision in Seattle. And it was my role, ego, my role to make sure that he succeeds because he is brilliant and was brilliant at what he did, but it's a 2 or 3 or multiple person operation. And I was good with the team part and he was good with the financial part. So together we worked really well. And I knew if I would have thrown in the cards and went back to Milwaukee and stopped doing that, even though many people said, you're killing yourself. You need to stop flying to Seattle every 2 weeks. You can't do that. And it doesn't have long-term long-term, whatever.
Sustainability. It's Mercury retrograde. It's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sustainability. So, so anyway, long story short, year 2, we're struggling. Year 3, we're building the office, we're making traction and things are moving and a lot of really cool things are happening. But the core reason why we started, we were still struggling. Year 4, he decides that he wants to move to Arizona and close the office. I decided that I really need to focus on Madison and Milwaukee. My daughter was now in college. She needed me around. I couldn't be on an airplane and be the father that I wanted to be. So we decided to close the office. So now I'm on this dock. And meanwhile, I've been working on this story over the last 4 years during this period of time. I'm on this dock and I'm thinking, I just wasted 4 years of my life. I spent close to probably $150,000 to do this, which isn't coming back. I put all these different things that I thought that I needed to do in place, trying to be a faithful servant. And I failed him, Roger, that was the person. I failed the reason why I believed I needed to be there. And basically, once again, that little voice in the back of my mind playing havoc. And I just start, again, downloading this information. So I got a piece of paper, 6 pages later, put it down the dock, wiped the tears away, got up, got into the car, left Seattle, haven't been back since. And it was when I picked up the book, and the point of this long-winded story is when I picked up the last chapter, which became the last chapter of the book, what I downloaded was a 15-year history. It was like if someone were to wind time back to 15 years and then push play and played it forward without my being in Seattle, totally different outcome, very bad outcome, and not the outcome that I would have wanted. And I would not have been the person that I needed to be to show up as the true servant I was trying to be, right? Totally destroyed my ego because it wasn't about me. It was about being in being and not forcing, setting back and letting the cards fall where they may, right? Just showing up and being willing to be authentically me, like the poem, right? And then the pushback they said was, what about Roger though? I was put in his life so that I could help him and I failed. And the reboot, which was the end of the chapter, was no, he was put in your life And Sabrina was the anchor to make sure it happened, because you needed him there, because without him there, you wouldn't have been there. Without him there, this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. And it would have been a completely different outcome than it was. And it wasn't about you or me. It was about stepping out and faithing it until I made it. And all the things I thought was right were not, they were the opposite. But I needed that to be in place, that season to play out the way it did, in order to have the blessings that came from it afterwards.
Right. And I truly believe, the creations, your book, for example, are your life's work. And so my friend's a comedian, and same with like my yoga or whatever I create, you have to go live your life. And based on that experience, that's your content for what you're going to write. And until you came full circle in that entire experience, there's no way you could have written the ending because you hadn't lived it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
I mean, sometimes it just takes time, 4 years fast forward, could have been, whatever number of years. But you needed to get to that point in your life to there wouldn't have been a way to learn those lessons or get there without having that time, even probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even the getting out of like one of the components, which I guess to put a little bit more meat behind the story, was in the middle of this season, right? Storm, because very much a storm. Our family was going in a very negative role. The kids were getting ready to go off to college. Sabrina, I had just moved her to Ohio State and into her own apartment, so my right hand person no longer was. The little girl flew and she wasn't coming back. Well, she came back, but in a different role. And my father passed away. In fact, the exact same day that I dropped her off at school, I went to his funeral. So it was like these major role models in my life, gone, 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 gone. And in a time when it would have been so easy to just throw in the cards and quit, I couldn't, because I had the office in Seattle. I had this mission that I was on, and I had to force and keep my mindset where it needed to be to get there. And through the process of being there, and that was the connection with why Roger was put in my life, because I needed someone that could be that role model, that could be that coach, that could be that friend, that could be that spiritual guide, so to speak, at the time when, and because of that, the storm was certainly very powerful, but he became the mountain. The office in Seattle became the safe haven that allowed all the other pieces to work themselves out.
When did you see this clearly?
Mm.
After? I mean, you really can't see why things are happening in the moment, but when we talked about this pause for reflection or stepping back and looking at the sculpture or your children or whatever, when you do that, you really can put the pieces together. I think of, like the game of life, or, a path or a timeline or a monopoly, and it might go sideways, upside down, and in multiple detours until you get there. And you can't really tell why in the moment, but later when you look back, it's very clear.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And that was kind of the same time that I had this realization, the same year that I finished the chapter and kind of started turning off the switches in that season, so to speak, was when my daughter and I had the conversation. And one of the earlier you asked me when she said that, what did I truly think? And in all honest, now that we're having this conversation, yeah, and I'm thinking about it, is the most powerful thing was it took being in Seattle, it took those 4 years to, and I think this is something that certainly stay-at-home moms, I'm sure, struggle through, is my whole identity was in the business, was in my kids, was in everything. I mean, I was the ideal, the super dad, so to speak, if there is such a, if I was a mom, I would have been a super mom. But in reverse, that was my whole role model, my whole identity, who I was in that. not in who I am today, not in who I needed to become to show up the way I am today. And it took the stripping away of all of that stuff to truly become who I am, independent again, and to regain my freedom, regain my what's the word I'm looking for? Witness, my true self, I guess, because I had given piece after piece after piece after piece of myself away to everybody else. I lost it. I was no longer, it was like in fragments all over the place. And it was that culmination of time allowed to pull back, to pull back and repackage it. And about the time it was unevenly repackaged, that was when my daughter looked at me and said, okay, go now, go fly. And without all of that, I wouldn't have understood what she was talking about. And it was such an amount of peace. It's like, wow, okay,
You
show
had
me
to
the
be
way.
ready. What?
Hmm. They said, show me the way. It was like, yeah, I had to be
Oh,
ready.
well, and it really, you talked about a lot about like, bringing all the pieces of yourself back in. And I also feel like the stripping away or the cleansing or the letting go or the layers of the onion, the removal of, we could put a lot of names on what we're removing here,
Hmm.
creates the space for you to draw those pieces back into yourself. You wouldn't have been able to if you hadn't have continued to let go and then maybe look inside and maybe see what you wanted to draw back or even recognize that you were needing to take your power back. It might not have even been visible.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think,
And you
I'm sorry,
go
go
ahead.
on. You can go.
Well, I think that there's this concept, and maybe you'll touch on it next, is about, you said you wouldn't have been able to hear what she said if you weren't where you were. And it's this not really related to, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And it also is like that glass seal or the not really glass ceiling, but you mentioned at the beginning where, someone was trying to be successful in their business until they realized what was, the limiting belief from childhood about
Hmm.
abundance, pretty much, or overabundance. The stage is set before you, but sometimes you're not ready to step onto it until you're really ready. But it
Hmm.
might be ready for you, and it sometimes in your life. You're like, it's right there, I see it, or I'm tripping over my own feet, or I'm hitting that plexiglass. But this, the stage is there, and like you said with hers, you might be blocked auditorily, even to you might hear the message and it's just not fully received or soaked in.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's so funny that the phrase that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? Because one of the things that Pistis, the guy, Pistis is Greek in faith, that Pistis told Sam, the character in the book, in the conversation, was to reverse that. And when the teacher is ready, the student will appear.
Your daughter.
Uh-huh. That. And I
Oh,
think
and go ahead.
and I think all of us in our lives, we have those people that are really our students, but yet they're also our teachers.
It relates to your clients. Like maybe if you're, they will arrive as your students if you're teaching something. And you do, I mean, without students, you can have all this content ready to go. Like, here's our lesson plan, guys. And, or even me for yoga class, someone else's shoulder hurts. Like, we are not doing what the plan was. And it
Mm.
really, begs the question of tapping into the energy of the moment. And, kind of how you and I create this whole thing here is, what's on the plate for today? Where is this flow going
Hmm.
to take us? Yes, we have information here. And sometimes there's new things coming in. And we talked about this earlier about, other people's comments very close to the time you might arrive to do some sort of speech or performance of your
Mm.
own can really influence your message, and it's very
Hmm.
timely. I think the time is very can be potent and important, and is of the essence.
Mm. Yeah, so true. Yeah, because a lot of times we don't necessarily know what people in the audience or people we are talking to, what they need to hear at the time, or what we think they need to hear may not necessarily be what that is. And it's being open to that. I mean, I've found situations where I will be, especially in the coaching arena, I'll be talking to somebody and they will say something. It's like, have you thought about this? And then we'll go off and kind of little tangent, and then it comes back to what we're talking about, and it's like, oh, where did that come from? But it needed to be there at the time because of where the person was at, and I couldn't see it, but the person heard it or the person saw it, and then they picked up on it and they ran with it.
You never know. You might have a whole conversation about, how to create your, cement foundation, and they might have heard, watch out for the stop sign. And they saw the color red and they're like, yes, that's what I needed to hear. And you're like, that really wasn't the message that I thought you were needing to receive, but it's that tiny little thing. And sometimes it's sometimes those things that we want to say and we don't, or we think, why is this thing coming through to say right now? Like, I need to tell this person this. And you find out later that that little jewel is very, very important, because they'll say, well, my mother had a necklace like that, and that reminds me of this, and now I'm doing this, and okay, I have my answer now, or I can write my final chapter, or I can move on to the next thing. And yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, notes in the way are that way. I love writing personal notes because I'll think if I'm going to write a note to somebody, I'll first think, what is it that the person needs to hear? And I'll just reflect on it for a couple of minutes and I'll write the note. And it's amazing how many times I'll get an email or I'll get a call from the person saying, wow, I was having a hard day. And that showed up just in time, or you said just what I needed to hear. And it's interesting because it goes back, instead of forcing or doing, to just be, to be in the moment and allow the action that we're going to do have its own natural course and see where it ends up. It's interesting how
Letting go and doing that. And you really, you can be intrigued and surprised by what comes out of it without being attached to the result, because it may be way 10 times bigger than you ever imagined.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And I think being open to, in order for us to truly be that leader, going back to the leadership scenario, or to be that thought leader, to be that teacher, we have to be able to listen, to kind of be vulnerable, to share a story that there's a story that I might share that has a tangible, a business lesson or a financial lesson to it. Then there's something like the story I just shared about being in Seattle, opening that office. Does that have anything to do with the other stuff we talked about? Not really. However, it was the lessons learned in that story that kind of brings the whole thing together. And being willing to, if a person had told me 5 years ago that I would be on a call that's going to be heard by people I don't know talking about something as vulnerable as that, I would have said they were nuts. However, if I truly have a heart to be that servant, if I truly have a heart to be that leader, to be the person of inspiration for someone else, I have to be, because that's part of the journey. Good, bad, and different. It's all part of the whole.
Yeah, I like the servant piece, because sometimes it really creates this ability to wake up and say, okay, what's my job today? Who needs to receive what? And I really think that the lessons sometimes are so simple, and it relates back to where we started with, this is a good full circle here, with, the three little pigs or the three little bears. I mean, the lesson, sometimes we've heard it for so many years and it's so simple, but you have to live it to really embody it and learn it. You're like, oh, that's what that means now. I get it. And I really think a lot of times you do have to live it. And it's that concept of like going around the entire world to remember that you just wanted to come back home, or everything you needed was right here anyway, but at least you have a comparison to know the alternative. So, well, it's been a joy to hear about your journey, Mike. It looked like you wanted to add one more thing there.
No, that's okay. Go on.
That was it. I was just going to come to a close here at the end of our show. So if you wanted to say anything else, go ahead.
Well, just that it's always enjoyable to talk with you. It's amazing how many different things that we can bring into a conversation, which it's always like I was sharing with you earlier about how I had a talk last week, and you and I were talking about something which changed the direction of that talk, inspired me, and I wanted to bring up one of the lessons in because I thought that it would fit, and it did, the conversation that we were having at that time. And it's fun to be able to have these conversations, and hopefully there's people that'll be listening to it that something might resonate with them, or another person will resonate with that person. And with the influences journey, one of the things that I was sharing with you about and having the podcast is it would be great to have you come on to the podcast and share some of the life lessons around health and around many of your successes and the things that you do with your clients that helps them become better versions of who they are.
Yeah, that would be very fun. And I do find that even after these, like this is over, I would love to be on your podcast just to comment on that. That would be very enjoyable. I think that what I found a lot of times after these interviews, even or someone, you get the influence from someone else, you'll notice, and I'll notice after this that, oh, this makes sense, or this conversation will influence how I talk with the next person that I interact with, which will in turn influence their conversation with the next person, and it's all connected. And it's again very timely, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this in the next several days and weeks. It's just kind of like sets the tone for the next wave.
Nice. Definitely. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a joy, and thank you to all of our listeners for being here with us today. We look forward to all the changes in your life that you can get out of any information that we shared today, out of our experiences and out of Mike's life experience and his stories and his journey. And we look forward to seeing you on another show. Till then, have a great day. You can say goodbye, Mike. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.